Opening credits. Ava and Carol Detective Agency. The Mystery of Solomon's Ring. Chapter 7. Villa de Cathedral. Smack. Ava awoke the next morning to a kiss on the forehead from her mom. "You're leaving already?" said Ava, stretching and yawning simultaneously. "We've hardly spent any time together." Ava's mom smiled at Ava as she brushed her hair gently from her face. "I promise to make it an early day today. We'll go sightseeing and have a fancy dinner together this evening, I promise." "And, Mom?" "Yes?" said Beth, looking into Ava's eyes lovingly. Was her daughter about to say something endearing?
"I would like to report a robbery. And I know who the thief is."
"What?" asked her mom, worry now filling her face.
"I want to report the theft of that dress you are wearing, because I'm stealing it when we get back to the States. Mom, you look beautiful."
Ava, laughed her mom, relief filling her face. "I'll see you this afternoon."
"Okay,"
smiled Ava.
"Love you, Mom."
"Love you too," said Mrs. Clark softly. The door clicked behind her, and Ava stared up at the ceiling, a smile plastered across her face. She had the coolest mom ever. The girls hesitated as they exited through the hotel's sliding glass doors. Their heads swiveled back and forth, searching for anyone suspicious. Florence had come to life. The tourists were easy to spot with their maps and phones out, looking confused. Locals worked their way around them, muttering their annoyance in Italian. Bicycles, cars, and colorful Vespa scooters zoomed by on the Lugarno-Amerigo Vespucci highway. The sunlight, sparkling like 1,000 diamonds, danced across the Arno River, creating a perfect backdrop. Ava closed her eyes and smiled. Carol laughed to herself. The controlled chaos probably matched what went on in Ava's brain every second of every day. After what seemed like an entire 2 minutes of searching for bad guys, the girls decided that the coast was clear. Carol had mapped out a simple route to get to the Villa de Cathedral on her phone. As they threaded their way through numerous small shops, Ava used the reflections of the glass storefronts to make sure they weren't being followed. Having skipped breakfast, the duo darted into Luigi's Bakery and purchased freshly baked cinnamon raisin bagels coated with to-die-for cream cheese. Ava thought the bagel was the most delicious thing she had ever tasted in her life. Carol thought the cream cheese must have been made in heaven and sent to Luigi's by angels each morning. "There's the Villa de Cathedral," said Carol excitedly, gesturing toward a colossal stone building that looked more like a castle. The Villa de Cathedral was a beautiful piece of architecture, with 9 majestic towers reaching toward the heavens. Ominous windows reached upward through pointed architecture. "Flying buttresses," recalled Carol from their art class. At the top of the largest tower, a winged angel stood, raising a sword skyward. Above the archway was a massive balcony containing dozens of sculptures of saintly men. Carol stared at the arched ceiling as they stepped through the doorway. It seemed to pierce the sky. Ava started walking first, heading to the heavy-looking doors. They were heavy, sure enough, and Ava had to really use her strength to pull open one of the doors, gripping onto the iron and heaving. They walked into the spacious opening, every wall holding an ornate sculpture built into the architecture. The cathedral was filled with golden light that glinted off the polished pews and marble statues, and it smelled of incense, smoky spice, and old wood. "These cathedrals are more like works of art than buildings," said Carol to Ava. She nodded. "It's incredible," said Ava, taking in the view. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, where the hero stumbles upon an abandoned castle hidden in the mountains, ancient and beautiful.
"Oh, man," Ava murmured. "This is beautiful. But it's going to be super hard to find that sculpture."
Carol shook her head.
"It's Michael. He's important, so they'd probably put him in a place of importance. Like,"
she pointed to a statue behind the sanctuary.
"there."
Ava looked at Carol, eyebrows raised.
"Remind me never to challenge you in a game of I Spy."
"You wouldn't stand a chance," laughed Carol as she bumped Ava's shoulder. The girls walked through the cathedral up to the statue, which towered over them. Carol couldn't believe it was just a statue. The waves in the archangel's robes looked so real, and he was every bit as beautiful and intimidating as she imagined an angel would be in person. In one hand, he held a spear, and in the other hand, a scroll. The girls surreptitiously examined the statue, each walking around, looking at the Latin script written below him to the top of his sculpted head.
"Carol,"
said Ava,
"what exactly did that writing say in the margin of the book?"
"Unlock the scroll," she replied quietly. Ava glanced around, trying not to look suspicious while scrutinizing the statue.
How exactly do you unlock a scroll?"
"I have no idea," said Carol. "It looks like it's a solid piece of marble." She looked around wearily. "There are security cameras everywhere, Aves. We don't want to draw a lot of attention."
"Right. We need to act like tourists," nodded Ava. "I'll stand in front of the statue. Act like you're taking pics of me from different angles, but focus on the scroll."
"Perfect," agreed Carol as she reached for her phone. Ava stood in front of the statue, striking touristy poses, while Carol zoomed in on the scroll. "I got some great pictures, Aves. Your parents are going to love these," smiled Carol.
"Oh, I bet they will. Mind if I scroll through them?"
smiled Ava, playing along.
Get it? Scroll through them?
"Next time you are alone with your thoughts," said Carol through gritted teeth, "please take a moment and Google the word subtle." The girls huddled around Carol's phone, but try as they might, they didn't see anything that looked like an opening for a key.
"Maybe there's a button? Or you have to twist it?" suggested Ava.
Carol magnified the picture even more. A series of symbols encircled the top and bottom of the scroll, but other than that, there were no other markings on the scroll.
"I wish I read old symbols."
"Yeah, I don't recognize—" Carol stopped. "Okay, I do recognize one symbol, except it's upside down." Carol dragged her finger across the screen, centering the image.
"That's the symbol for Michael,"
Ava whispered excitedly.
"The same one on the paper, except it's upside down."
Carol nodded and continued to stare at the image.
"Why would it be upside down?"
inquired Ava.
"I mean, certainly, if Lucas sculpted Michael, he would—"
Ava watched in horror as Carol suddenly climbed up on the base of the statue.
"Carol, you can't touch a crazy old statue."
Using her fingernail, Carol placed it on the edge of the upside-down symbol and pulled. The marble symbol snapped off into Carol's hand. A small hole appeared. Carol's heart was pounding, adrenaline rushing through her body.
"Carol, get down! People are looking!"
Ava's head spun from side to side.
"Oh, we are so going to jail. Get down!"
"Ava, chill! I found something!" The hole was tiny, the size of a match head, and from the hole, a tiny piece of knotted thread protruded. Ava heard the squawk of a walkie-talkie in the distance. A security guard appeared from a hidden door across the sanctuary.
"Carol, we have company," hissed Ava.
Carol set her jaw and gave the string a gentle tug. There was a soft, mechanical click, and then, from out of the base of the statue, a thin, small copper cylinder rolled out onto the floor.
"What in the absolute heck?"
whispered Ava, as she quickly reached down and snatched the copper tube off the floor. Carol jumped down from the statue. The security guard was running toward them. "Carol!"
"I know!" she cried out. "Run!"
"Stop!" yelled the guard. Ava and Carol weren't about to stop. They raced through the cathedral, pushing their way through stunned tourists. They burst through the sanctuary into the cathedral's rotunda. They could see the massive doors that would lead to freedom. But just as they put on a burst of speed, a huge guard stepped in front of the door. His legs spread wide, his huge, beefy arms crossed defiantly across his chest. A grin crossed his face, as if to say, "Come on, try me." Carol was about to shout to Ava that they needed to find another way out when the door opened behind the guard. Ava saw their chance. "High-low!" she screamed. Ava dove head first, sliding along the slick marble floor through the beefy guard's legs. Simultaneously, Carol ran at the man at breakneck speed. At the last moment, Ava kicked out at the back of the man's knees, sending him sprawling onto the floor as Carol hurdled him and continued through the doorway. The girls ran down the steps and down the street, looking back only when the cathedral was a tiny dot behind them. Winded, the girls sat down on the grass, under a small grove of trees, fighting to catch their breath.
"High five for the high-low,"
wheezed Carol.
"That was crazy,"
gasped Ava. "I cannot believe you climbed up on that statue."
"It's the quiet ones you always have to be afraid of,"
smiled Carol creepily.
"Well, it was brilliant,"
praised Ava. She was about to pull out the small copper tube when Carol put her hand on her arm.
"Probably not the best idea to do that here."
Ava looked around.
"Yeah, you're right. Let's get back to the hotel."
Chapter 8. Don't Mess with Nuns. The girls began their journey back to the hotel, both glancing around every now and then to make sure they weren't being followed.
"Ava, stop and tie your shoe,"
whispered Carol suddenly.
"What?" "Stop and tie your shoe. I need to see something."
Ava immediately understood. She knelt down and began retying her shoe.
"What is it?"
she asked as she double-knotted the laces.
"They're getting smarter."
"Who is getting smarter?" said Ava, standing.
"The bad guys. Don't turn around, but there is a man in a suit, wearing sneakers. He's been following us since we passed the bus stop."
"Oh, great. And he's wearing sneakers? With a suit? I hope they're at least stylish." The girls picked up their pace, maneuvering through the crowds of tourists and locals, catching sight of him on the huge glass windows as they passed each store.
"In here!"
Carol grabbed Ava's arm, and they ducked into a busy ice cream parlor. They weaved and dodged through a crowd of patrons enjoying their ice cream and gelato.
"Scusami,"
said Carol over and over again. She heard Ava saying it too, but they didn't stop for a second. They continued to work their way to the back of the store, as far away from the entrance as possible. They reached the back of the ice cream store and turned toward the rear door. The hairs on Ava's neck stood straight up as the man in the suit calmly maneuvered through the parlor with the grace of a shark. Ava could see a swirl of tattoos starting from his jaw and disappearing into the collar of his shirt. His hair was buzzed short, revealing a nasty purple scar that ran the entire width of his forehead.
If he had 2 bolts on each side of his head, he would look like Frankenstein, thought Ava.
Ava poked Carol, who looked at her friend with a panicked expression. She nodded to the counter, where a girl with a freckly, bored face and hair twisted in a bun took a couple's money and handed them change.
"Come on,"
said Carol urgently.
"Follow me."
Ava followed Carol as she crawled through a sea of legs and feet toward the counter, their sneakers skimming the ground quickly. Shouting,
"Scusa!"
to the girl behind the counter, Ava and Carol leapt over the counter and burst through a door into a kitchen where young men and women were busy scooping ice cream and making homemade cones. The girls raced through the kitchen, shouting apologies, and pushed through a screen door. Looking left and right, Carol chose left, and the two began running as fast as they could. Moments later, Ava heard the door slam behind them. She risked a glance over her shoulder. The man was already racing toward them.
"Here he comes!"
yelled Ava. The girls had almost made it to the end of the alley, where they heard the hissing of brakes as a bus pulled into a bus stop.
"The bus!"
shouted Carol. Just a few more steps. The girls glanced back over their shoulders, which was a horrible mistake. Ava felt a jolting impact against her chest. Carol's legs smashed into something, sending her airborne. There was a flurry of black robes and a sickening clatter. For a split second, Carol thought they'd run right into a second bad guy. That was until she saw a black and white habit fly into the air. Ava and Carol had slammed into a nun riding a shiny red bicycle, knocking her off her bike.
"Mamma mia!"
exclaimed the woman, haphazardly brushing off her robe and regaining her habit and straightening the large cross that hung around her neck. She glowered at the girls with all the wrath of God.
"Scusa,"
said Carol desperately. She then pointed at the man in the close distance running after them. She searched for the words in her head, wishing she'd had a dictionary on her.
Male, aiuto,
She stumbled over her words.
Per favore, signora, aiuto."
The nun looked at the man and then back at the girls. She nodded, understanding dawning on her face. "This man is chasing 2 children. How dare he?" She lifted her shiny red bike, blocking the alley.
"Correre!"
she yelled at the girls. "Run!" The girls didn't hesitate. They took off to the right down another alleyway, throwing thank yous back to the nun as they sprinted away. Neither could help but look back. They saw the nun whip back her robe, a picture of absurd drama, and from her belt hung a huge wooden paddle. Something visceral happened to the man, a change crossing over his face. He skidded on his heels, eyes dropping to the paddle like it was made of barbed wire. The nun smoothly and swiftly drew it from her belt, like St. Michael slaying his dragon, and raised it above her head. The glare she'd given the girls earlier now intensified. As the man attempted to stop his momentum, shouting challengingly, "No, no!" the nun swung the paddle, thwacking the man's head. Thwack! Both of the girls winced. Ooh, that had to hurt. It worked, though, and he turned and began racing back up the alleyway, the nun coming after him, a flurry of black robes whipping around her, her tongue spitting fire. The girls grinned at each other.
"Mamma mia!"
laughed Carol. "I think that nun's my new role model," said Ava.
Next stop, the hotel?
Carol puffed as they ran. Ava nodded. So long as we make it there alive.
If you're enjoying Thomas Lockhaven's audiobook content, please like and subscribe. It's the best way to help out the channel.